We don't have that kind of money lying around, Sarah. You need to be realistic about this. My father stood in the doorway of my apartment, arms crossed, his face a mask of stern disapproval. Behind him, my mother nodded along, her mouth pressed into a thin line. I just stood there, my 7-year-old son, Liam, asleep in the next room. His breathing was labored, even with the hiss of the oxygen machine filling the silence. The medical bills were fanned out across my kitchen table like a losing hand of cards, mocking me. $85,000. That was the number. The amount the specialist quoted for an experimental treatment that was Liam's only chance. His rare heart condition wasn't responding to the conventional methods anymore, and the clock was ticking. My name is Sarah. I'm 31. I live in a small town in Ohio, working as a middle school science teacher and raising Liam entirely on my own. His father? He walked out when Liam was diagnosed at age 3. Couldn't handle a sick kid. That was 4 years ago, and I'd been fighting this battle alone ever since. My parents lived 20 minutes away in their comfortable suburban house. The same house where my younger sister, Olivia, still had her childhood bedroom preserved like a shrine. Realistic, I repeated, my voice cracking. My son might die without this. The doctor said he has maybe 6 months if we don't act now. My mother stepped forward, placing a hand on my father's arm. It was the gesture she always used when she wanted to soften his message but wouldn't dare contradict him. Honey, we know this is difficult, but we've already helped you so much. We paid for 3 of his surgeries. We can't just empty our retirement accounts. I'm not asking you to empty them. I'm asking for a loan. I will pay back every cent. I'll get a second job. I'll do whatever it takes. My father just shook his head, his expression cold. Sarah, your financial situation is already a disaster. You're barely keeping your head above water. How would you pay us back? Be sensible. There are payment plans, medical financing options. You should look into those. I had. I'd spent weeks, sleepless nights, researching every possible avenue. The payment plans required a timeline Liam didn't have. The medical financing companies? They saw my mountain of medical debt and wouldn't approve me. I was already drowning. I was terrified of bankruptcy, of losing what little we had. I was already getting notices about foreclosure on my small apartment. I've tried everything else, I said, my voice barely a whisper. You're my last hope. My mother's expression flickered. Just for a second, I saw a trace of sympathy. I thought she might convince him. But then my father spoke again, his voice firm, final. We can't do it, Sarah. I'm sorry. We have our own future to think about, and we have to be careful. We have Olivia to think about. A wedding is expensive, you know. It's not like we can offer no budget limits or an unlimited wedding budget. We can't just hand out an all-expenses-paid life. We just can't. He said it. Just like that. All I needed was a check to save my son, and they were talking about my sister's future wedding. They left. I stood at the window and watched their car pull away. The weight of their refuse settled over me like a suffocating blanket. I walked into Liam's room, the steady hiss of the oxygen machine counting down the seconds. His small chest rose and fell unevenly. He looked so peaceful. He had no idea his own grandparents had just sealed his fate. I made the calls the next day. I reached out to every branch of the family tree I could think of. Distant cousins, my mother's siblings, anyone who might listen. Most offered sympathies and small, hesitant amounts that wouldn't make a dent. My Aunt Karen sent $500 with a note saying she wished it could be more. I was grateful for every single dollar, but I was trying to fill an ocean with a teaspoon. The weight of their refusal was a constant, cold presence. 2 weeks later, I came home from a brutal day of teaching to find Liam struggling to breathe. His lips had a faint blue tinge that sent pure, hot panic shooting through my veins. I called an ambulance, and we were rushed to the hospital. They stabilized him, but the cardiologist, Dr. Evans, pulled me aside. His expression was grim. His condition is deteriorating faster than we anticipated, he said, his voice low. Without that experimental treatment we discussed. I'd say he has 3 months at most. Maybe less. I just nodded, numb. I couldn't speak past the lump of ice in my throat. My baby had 3 months. 3 months, unless I could find $85,000. That night, I started a crowdfunding campaign. I poured my entire soul into the description, sharing photos of Liam's bright, infectious smile from before he got so sick. Friends shared it. Teachers from my school donated. Even some of my students' parents contributed what they could. But after 2 agonizing weeks, the total was only $12,000. It wasn't even close. And then, the phone call from Olivia. My sister's voice was breathless, practically vibrating with excitement. "Sarah. I have the most amazing news. Mark proposed. We're getting married." I tried. God, I tried to muster some enthusiasm, to push down the heavy fog of despair in my chest. That's wonderful, Olivia. Congratulations. I know, right? And Mom and Dad are being so incredibly generous. They're paying for the whole wedding. Can you believe it? They told us we can have whatever we want. Absolutely no budget limits. My hand tightened around the phone. Mark and I are thinking. A destination wedding. Maybe Italy, or the south of France. Oh. Sarah. It's going to be absolutely perfect. Dad said it's his little girl's special day, and nothing is too good. We're meeting with wedding planners next week. The wedding won't be for another year, but we're starting now to make sure we get exactly what we want. An unlimited wedding budget. Can you imagine? I stood there, in my tiny apartment, with medical bills stacked on every surface. My son was fighting for every single breath in the next room. And I was listening to my sister gush about her unlimited wedding budget. Something cold and hard formed in my chest. A tiny, bitter seed of understanding that would take root and grow in the dark months to come. The months that followed were a blur of hospital visits and mounting despair. I maxed out every credit card I owned. I took out personal loans at predatory interest rates that made me sick to my stomach. I sold every single thing of value I possessed. My grandmother's ring, the only heirloom I had, went to a pawn shop for $800. My reliable car was downgraded to a 5-year-old sedan that rattled every time I hit a red light. I moved from my 1-bedroom apartment to a tiny studio, the kind with a mattress that folds out from the wall, just to save a few $100s on rent. All of it was a desperate, failing attempt to find the money, to somehow stop the clock. And through it all, Olivia's wedding plans progressed like an unstoppable, glittering freight train. Every family dinner I was forced to attend, every phone call, every single interaction somehow circled back to the wedding. My parents were completely consumed by it. They were attending cake tastings at 5-star restaurants, touring venues in Tuscany via video call, and having heated debates over floral arrangements that cost more than my entire monthly salary. I tried to be happy for Olivia. I truly did. She was my little sister, and there was a time, long ago, when we were close. But that closeness had faded over the years, like an old photograph left in the sunday. It became painfully clear that our parents saw us through 2 completely different lenses. Olivia was the golden child. She was the one who did everything right. She graduated college with honors, landed a prestigious job at a marketing firm, and dated the right kind of men from good families. I was the other one. The one who got pregnant at 23 with a man who walked out. The one who chose a teaching career instead of something more lucrative. The one who was now drowning in a financial situation of her own making, who couldn't even keep her own son healthy. That's how they saw me. The one who was always in a battle alone, always needing something. Their roles were set in stone. Olivia was the investment, and I was the liability. They were pouring all their resources into her success, while I was being told to be realistic about a heart condition that was stealing my son's life. The bitter irony of it all was a constant taste in my mouth. One evening in July, my mother called. "Sarah, honey, we need to talk about the wedding." "What about it?" I was exhausted. I'd just finished a summer school session and spent the last 3 hours at the hospital with Liam. "Well, Olivia wants you to be a bridesmaid, of course. But the dresses are going to be about $300, and we need you to order yours soon." $300. I did the math in my head, a calculation that had become second nature. That was almost 2 weeks of Liam's medications. "Mom, I don't know if I can afford that right now." There was a heavy sigh on the other end of the line. "Sarah, this is your sister's wedding." "I know, but things are really tight." "Liam's medical bills." "You are always talking about Liam's medical expenses," she interrupted, her voice suddenly taking on a sharp, impatient edge. "I understand he's sick, but life has to go on for the rest of us. This is Olivia's special day." I closed my eyes. Can I think about it?" "The deadline is next week," she said, her voice clipped. Olivia has her heart set on you being in the party. After we hung up, I sat in the dark of my tiny studio apartment and just cried. How had it come to this? How had my own family become so blind to what was happening right in front of them? My son was fighting for every breath, and they were worried about bridesmaid dresses. Liam's condition continued to decline. The experimental treatment was officially off the table. We had missed the window. The doctors shifted to palliative care, focusing only on keeping him comfortable. Every day, I watched my son fade. His bright, curious spirit was dimming along with his physical strength. He stopped asking when he could go back to school. He stopped talking about being a scientist. He knew. In that quiet, heartbreaking way children just know, he knew he was running out of time. I took a leave of absence from teaching to be with him. It was unpaid, which meant my already precarious financial situation became a full-blown catastrophe. I applied for every grant, every charity, every assistance program I could find. Most had waiting lists that were months long, or criteria I didn't meet. Then, in September, 5 long months after my parents first refused to help, my mother called, bubbling with news. It was about Olivia's bachelorette party. They had rented a villa in Napa Valley for the weekend. 12 of her friends. All expenses paid. By our parents. Wine tastings, spa treatments, I provide a chef. It was absolutely magical. My mother gushed. Olivia was so happy. You should have seen her face. How much did it cost? I asked, the words falling out of my mouth before I could stop them. Oh, I don't know exactly. Your father handled that. Maybe $10,000? But it was worth every penny to see her so joyful. $10,000. More than a tenth of the money that could have saved his life, spent on a single weekend. I felt something inside me crack. That sounds wonderful, I said. My voice flat. You know, Sarah, I wish you'd try to be more excited about all this. Olivia feels like you're not really supporting her. I laughed. It was a harsh, dry sound that startled me. Olivia feels I'm not supporting her? She does. She's noticed you've been distant. And you still haven't confirmed about the dress. I can't afford the dress, Mom. I told you that. Well, she said, and her voice dropped into that tone of pure, condescending judgment. Maybe if you managed your money better, you wouldn't always be in this position. The words hung in the air, toxic and suffocating. Managed my money better? As if I was drowning in medical debt because of some personal failing. As if my child was sick because I hadn't been responsible enough. As if they hadn't just spent $10,000 on a party. I have to go, I said. Liam needs me. Of course he does, she replied, and I heard the unspoken judgment. You know, Sarah, maybe if you weren't so focused on Liam's problems all the time, you'd be able to enjoy life more. Olivia manages to balance everything so well. I hung up without saying goodbye. October brought a chill that seemed to settle right into my bones, a cold that had nothing to do with the weather. Liam was in and out of the hospital, his small body fighting a battle it was destined to lose. The doctor had stopped talking about treatments and started speaking in hushed tones about weeks, not months. I spent every possible moment at his bedside, reading him his favorite books about dinosaurs and astronauts, telling him stories about what heaven might be like, holding his small, cool hand through the waves of pain. My parents visited. Occasionally. They usually stopped by on their way to or from some wedding-related appointment, a tasting, a fitting, a meeting. They'd stay for maybe 20 minutes. They would pat Liam's hand awkwardly, their discomfort palpable, and then leave with visible expressions of relief. It was hard to watch. Hard to see their awkwardness around their own dying grandson. Hard to see how eager they were to escape that sterile room, to get back to the much happier, brighter world of wedding preparations. They had, in essence, abandoned him. Olivia came once. She stood in the doorway of Liam's hospital room, looking like she stepped out of a magazine. Designer clothes, perfect hair. Her outfit probably cost more than my rent. She barely made it 5 minutes before claiming she had to leave for a dress fitting. He's so thin, she whispered to me in the hallway, as if this was some new revelation. As if I hadn't been the one watching my son waste away, day by agonizing day. Yes, I said. He is. It must be so hard for you. She touched my arm, a gesture that might have been meant as comfort but felt completely hollow, utterly performative. But you're so strong, Sarah. You've always been the strong one. I'd heard that word strong so many times. I was starting to realize it was just a word people used when they were relieved they didn't have to be strong enough to handle this alone. Strong enough to not need help. Strong enough to watch your child die while your family spent a fortune on a party. The wedding is in 3 weeks, she continued, oblivious. I really hope you'll reconsider being a bridesmaid. It would mean so much to me. And, you know, it might be good for you. A chance to celebrate something happy. To have a break from all this. A break. As if I could take a vacation from my son's death. As if I could just put on a smile and an overpriced dress and pretend my entire world wasn't collapsing, all while Liam was fighting for every single breath. I'll think about it, I lied. It was just easier than trying to explain. The wedding invitations had arrived at my studio 2 months earlier. Heavy, cream-colored cardstock with gold embossing. The invitation suite alone probably cost $50 per guest. I did the math, automatically. It was a habit I couldn't break. Converting everything into medical treatments we couldn't afford. The invitations could have been a month of physical therapy. The venue deposit could have been a year of his medications. I learned later, through my mother's casual, proud mentions. The final cost of Olivia's wedding was $230,000. $230,000. The number echoed in my head, a silent scream. They had spent nearly 3 times what could have saved his life, what could have saved my grandson's life on a single day of celebration. The venue alone was $80,000. Almost exactly what I had begged them for. The flowers were $15,000. The catering, $40,000. The dress, $12,000. My mother recited these figures with no idea what they were doing to me. How every single dollar amount felt like another twist of the knife. Or maybe she did know. And she just didn't care. 2 weeks before the wedding, Liam had a terrible day. His small heart was giving out. The monitors started screaming their warnings, a sound that will haunt me forever, and nurses rushed into the room. I stood frozen beside his bed, gripping his small hand, watching the medical team fight to stabilize him. They succeeded, but Dr. Evans pulled me aside afterward. "Sarah," he said, his face etched with a kindness that almost broke me, "he doesn't have much time left. Days. Maybe a week. I think you should consider calling family. Anyone who might want to say goodbye." I called my parents. My father answered, his voice distracted, background noise filtering through. "Sarah, we're right in the middle of the rehearsal dinner preparations. Can this wait?" "Liam's son was dying," I said, my voice completely hollow. "The doctor says days at most." There was a pause. Then, oh, Sarah. I'm so sorry. Do you need us to come? Do I need you to come?" My son, their grandson, was dying grandson, and he was asking if I needed them to come. "Yes," I said. "I think Liam would want to see you." Of course. We'll try to stop by tomorrow. We have the final venue walkthrough in the afternoon, but maybe in the morning." They came the next day. They arrived at 10 a.m., holding Starbucks cups, looking rushed. They stayed for 15 minutes. Liam was barely conscious, his breathing shallow even with the oxygen turned to maximum. My mother cried a little, dabbing at her eyes with an expensive-looking tissue. My father stood stiffly by the door, checking his watch. Twice. "We have to go," my father finally said, clearing his throat. "The florist is expecting us at 11. The florist," I repeated, numb. "For the centerpieces. It's important we get this right. There's no time for mistakes this close to the wedding." He seemed utterly oblivious to the grotesque irony of his words. Standing in a hospital room where the ultimate mistake, choosing flowers over family, was about to claim its final, irreversible victim. They left with promises to come back soon. Promises I knew, deep down, they would never keep. Olivia never came. She never came to say goodbye to her nephew. She was, I was told, completely overwhelmed with last-minute wedding emergencies. The string quartet she'd hired had a cellist who'd fallen ill and been replaced. This, apparently, was a crisis worthy of multiple frantic, tearful phone calls. Liam died on a Tuesday morning, 3 days before Olivia's wedding. He slipped away quietly in his sleep, his small hand held tight in mine. The nurse who came in and pronounced him. She cried. She cried more than my parents would when I called to tell them. My mother's first words, after I told her my son, her grandson, was gone. "Oh, no. Oh, Sarah. No. What terrible timing. Terrible timing. Because the funeral would interfere with the wedding preparations. That was the moment. That was the exact second something fundamental shifted inside me. The grief was a tsunami, overwhelming and absolute. But beneath it, beneath the pain, I felt something else growing. Something cold, and hard. And infinitely patient. They had made their choice. Now, I would make mine. The funeral was scheduled for Friday, just 2 days before Olivia's Sunday wedding. I didn't ask them to change the wedding date. I didn't ask Olivia to postpone. I knew what the answer would be, and I simply didn't have the energy to hear them explain, once again, why their party was more important than my son's burial. What I didn't expect was for them to ask me to change the funeral. My mother called on Wednesday evening. Sarah, honey, we need to talk about the funeral arrangements. I was sitting in Liam's empty room, surrounded by his dinosaur posters, his collection of rocks, the science kit I'd bought him for Christmas that he was never well enough to use. What about them? Well, Friday is just. It's really difficult for us, she said, her voice strained with inconvenience. We have the wedding rehearsal that afternoon, and then the rehearsal dinner in the evening. It's all scheduled. Deposits have been paid. Could you possibly move the funeral to Thursday? Or maybe next week? I stared at the wall, unable to process the words. You want me to change my son's funeral, because it conflicts with a wedding rehearsal? It's not just a rehearsal, Sarah. It's the whole schedule. We have out-of-town guests arriving. Mark's family is flying in from Atlanta. Your father is giving a toast at the dinner. We simply can't miss it. Liam is your grandson. And we'll be there to honor him, of course we will. But Thursday would just work so much better for everyone. Everyone. My voice came out flat, devoid of all emotion. I was beyond anger, beyond hurt. Everyone would be more convenient if we buried my son a day early so you don't miss cocktail hour. Don't be dramatic, Sarah, she snapped, her patience gone. You're making this sound worse than it is. We are trying to support both you and Olivia. Why can't you be more flexible? I hung up. The funeral stayed on Friday. I arranged it myself. I paid for it with money I borrowed from my principal, a man who had shown me more grace and support in the past year than my own parents. It was a small service. 20 people, maybe. My Aunt Karen came. A few teachers from my school. Some parents of Liam's former classmates. My parents arrived 45 minutes late, dressed in expensive, dark-colored clothes that were clearly chosen for the wedding festivities to follow. They stayed for the service but slipped out immediately after, skipping the small reception I'd organized back at my apartment. We really have to go, my mother whispered, kissing the air near my cheek. Olivia is having an absolute crisis about the seating arrangements. But it was a lovely service, Sarah. Very. Tasteful. Tasteful. My son's funeral was tasteful. I watched them leave, watched them drive away to their important appointments and critical emergencies, and I felt something inside me finally turn to stone. The grief was still there, a crushing, absolute, suffocating weight. But it was contained now, locked behind a wall of ice-cold clarity. Saturday, I spent alone in my studio apartment, surrounded by sympathy cards and a fresh pile of medical bills from his final hospital stay. The crowdfunding campaign had been closed. The $12,000 was a distant memory, used up months ago. I now owed over $73,000 in outstanding medical debt, not to mention the maxed-out credit cards. Liam died, but the financial nightmare he left behind had just made it all pointless. Sunday morning. Olivia's wedding day. I woke at dawn. I hadn't wanted to acknowledge it, but my phone lit up with a text from my mother. Wish you were here to share this special day. Olivia looks absolutely stunning. I stared at that message for a long time. Wish you were here. As if I'd simply chosen not to attend. As if I was missing it because of a scheduling conflict, and not because I had buried my son 48 hours earlier. My phone continued to buzz all day. She had added me to some kind of family group chat. The photos loaded, one by one. The venue in Tuscany, bathed in golden hour light. Olivia in her designer gown, a dress that cost more than my car. The elaborate, cascading floral arrangements. The 5-tier cake. The champagne tower. $230,000 of celebration. While my son's body lay in a new grave, in a cemetery where I couldn't even afford a proper headstone yet. I scrolled through the images with a strange, numb detachment. Everyone looked so happy. My father, beaming with pride in his tuxedo. My mother, elegant and smiling. Extended family members I'd called, begging for help, now dressed in their finest, toasting with champagne that cost more per bottle than they'd donated to Liam's fund. One photo showed my parents dancing, my mother's head thrown back in laughter. The caption: "Best day ever. So blessed." I set the phone down and walked to the bathroom. I looked at myself in the mirror. I'd lost 15 pounds. My eyes were sunken, circled with shadows. I looked like a ghost. I looked like someone who had watched their child die while their family partied. That night, alone in my studio, I made myself a promise. This wasn't over. They thought they could discard Liam's life, discard me, and just move on to their celebrations without consequence. They thought their money and their social standing could insulate them from accountability. They were wrong. I didn't know how yet. But I would make them understand what they had done. I would make them feel a fraction of what I felt. It wasn't revenge. It was justice. A reckoning. I pulled out a notebook and a pen, and I started writing down everything. My phone buzzed again. Another text from my mother. Home from Italy. Exhausted, but so happy. Olivia and Mark's first dance was magical. I'll send you the video. I typed back. Glad you had a good time. The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then appeared again. Finally. We'll come by next week to check on you. I'm sure you're feeling better by now. Feeling better. As if grief operated on a schedule. As if 1 week after your child's death, you were just recovered. I didn't respond. The weeks after the wedding passed in a gray, hollow haze. I returned to work, moving through my days like a ghost. My students were kind, treating me with a gentle fragility. I needed the structure, needed something to fill the agonizingly empty hours that used to be consumed by doctor appointments and medication schedules. And hope. My parents called occasionally. Brief. Shallow check-ins that felt more like an obligation than genuine concern. How are you holding up? They'd ask, and then immediately fill the silence with updates about Olivia's honeymoon, about their holiday plans. They never mentioned Liam. It was as if he had never existed. As if acknowledging his absence might spoil their good mood. Olivia sent a single text. I'm sorry about everything. I hope we can move past this. Move past. What, exactly? Move past watching my son die? Move past being abandoned by my entire family? Move past the fact that she had a $250,000 wedding while my child suffocated to death because we couldn't afford a treatment. I didn't respond to that, either. In December, 2 months after Liam died, my parents invited me to Christmas dinner. I almost declined, but a cold curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to see them. I wanted to look them in the eyes and understand how they could possibly live with what they had done. Their house was a festive wonderland, decorated like a magazine spread. A 12-foot tree, garlands on every surface, the smell of expensive catering. Olivia and Mark were already there, looking tanned and relaxed from their honeymoon in Bali. Sarah. My mother hugged me, her perfume overwhelming. I'm so glad you came. We've missed you. I stood stiffly in her embrace. Thank you for inviting me. Dinner was an elaborate performance. Prime rib, lobster tails, wine that my father proudly announced cost $200 a bottle. They all talked and laughed, sharing stories from the wedding, from the honeymoon. I sat in silence, pushing food around my plate. Sarah, you're so quiet, Olivia said, her voice laced with that performative concern that never reached her eyes. Are you okay? I'm fine. You know, she continued, Mark and I were thinking. Maybe you should consider moving. A fresh start might help you heal. This city just has too many sad memories now. I looked at her. This woman who was my sister in name only. Where would I go? I don't know. Somewhere cheaper, maybe? We know you're struggling financially. Mark's company has an office in Kansas City. Cost of living is much lower. We could help you find something. Help me move away. Remove the uncomfortable reminder of their choices. My father cleared his throat. Sarah, your mother and I have been discussing your situation. We think you need to seriously consider bankruptcy. It's the responsible thing to do, given your crippling medical debt. You'll never pay off those medical bills on a teacher's salary. Better to just wipe the slate clean. Start over. Start over. As if Liam was just a financial miscalculation to be written off. We could help you find a good bankruptcy attorney, my mother added. I set down my fork, the small clink silencing the table. You know what really would have helped? $85,000, 15 months ago. The air froze. Olivia looked at Mark, horrified. My mother's smile evaporated. Sarah, my father said, his voice low and warning. We have been over this. Have we? I asked. Because I don't remember us ever really discussing it. You said no, and that was the end of it. We made a difficult decision based on our financial situation. Your financial situation? I laughed, gesturing around the opulent room. This doesn't look like a difficult financial situation. The $230,000 wedding didn't suggest financial difficulty. That's not fair. Olivia's face flushed. Isn't it? I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. You spent almost 3 times what could have saved his life on a single day. A party. Flowers and cake and a dress you'll wear once. Sarah, that is enough, my father said, standing up as well, his face red with anger. We made the choice we thought was right. We are not going to apologize for supporting your sister's happiness. And what about Liam's life? I shot back. What about supporting your grandson's life? He was sick, my mother said, her voice shaking. The doctor said there was no guarantee the treatment would even work. We weren't going to throw away good money on something that might not even help. But you'd throw away twice that much on party favors and centerpieces that went in the trash the next day? Get out, my father spat. If you're going to be this disrespectful in my house, you can leave. I grabbed my coat. Don't worry. I'm going. You're just bitter because your life didn't turn out the way you wanted. Olivia, the golden child, called after me. It's not our fault you made bad choices. I stopped at the door. I turned back and looked at them. All of them, standing together. A unified front of righteous. Comfortable denial. Bad choices, I repeated. Like trusting my family. Like believing blood meant something. Like thinking you'd choose your grandson over a party. I walked out into the cold December night and never looked back. That was the last time I spoke to any of them for 4 years. Life, as they say, goes on. Because it has to. I followed my father's one piece of useful advice. I declared bankruptcy. It was a humiliating, soul-crushing process. It wiped out the crushing mountain of medical debt, but it shattered my credit, branding me as a failure for years to come. I moved to a cheaper apartment in a worse neighborhood, the kind of place where you hear sirens all night. I took on tutoring jobs in the evenings and on weekends, any extra cash I could scrape together. I existed. I didn't live. But I also planned. I couldn't touch them. Not yet. I was too powerless, too broken, too consumed with just surviving the grief and the financial ruin. But I was patient. I learned to be patient. I watched them from a distance, following their perfect lives through social media accounts they never realized I could still see. My mother, in her quest to curate the perfect family image, had left her profile public. I documented everything. I added to my notebooks. I waited. A year after her wedding, Olivia got pregnant. My mother's social media exploded with constant updates. The baby shower, the elaborate nursery preparations, the gender reveal. The baby, a girl named Chloe, arrived healthy and perfect. The photos showed my parents beaming, holding their first grandchild, as if Liam had never existed. As if Chloe was their first, their only. I saw a comment from a distant cousin, someone who knew about Liam. Congratulations on your first grandchild. So exciting. My mother's reply, right there for the world to see. Yes, we are just over the moon. She's our everything. Not a correction. Not a polite, our first granddaughter. Not even a private acknowledgement that another grandchild had existed, had mattered, had died. Liam was officially erased from the family narrative. I took a screenshot. I printed it. And I added it to my collection. 2 years after Liam died, I went back to school. I took online classes at night, grinding my way toward a master's degree in education administration. 3 years after that, I was promoted to assistant principal. The salary increase was modest, but it was progress. It was a step up. I was building something, slowly, brick by brick, on the ashes of my old life. I also started saving money. Every extra dollar went into a separate account, an account I never, ever touched. I didn't know what I was saving it for, exactly. Not a house, not a car. I was saving it for an opportunity. I was saving it because I had learned the hard way that power required capital. During those years, my parents tried to reach out. A birthday card with a generic message. A Christmas gift sent through the mail, usually a gift card to a store I didn't shop at. My father called once to tell me they'd set up a college fund for Chloe and wondered if I wanted to contribute. I hung up on him. Olivia sent a birth announcement when she had her second child, a boy named Noah. The card featured a professional photo of their perfect, smiling family. On the back, in cursive, someone had written, "Hope you're doing well." An afterthought. I kept every card, every announcement, every casual, dismissive attempt to smooth over the chasm they had created. It was all evidence. 4 years after Liam died, I was the principal of a successful middle school. I was earning enough to live comfortably, though I still kept my lifestyle modest. I had rebuilt myself from nothing. I had created a life that had purpose, even without the person who had once given it meaning. I'd also continued to passively follow my family's activities. Olivia's husband, Mark, had been promoted. They'd bought a larger house in an exclusive, gated neighborhood. My parents had taken up golf, joining an expensive country club. They traveled, posting photos from cruises and European cities. Their financial situation had clearly never been better. Life was good for them. Then, in early spring, something changed. I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line, "Important Family Matter." I almost deleted it, assuming it was spam. But something made me open it. "Sarah, this is your Aunt Karen. I'm reaching out because I thought you should know. Your father lost his job 3 months ago. He's been trying to keep it quiet, but the situation is serious. His entire retirement account was invested in his company stock, and the company collapsed, went bankrupt. Your parents have lost almost everything. They're facing foreclosure on their house. I know you and they aren't close, but I thought you'd want to know. Your father is too proud to ask for help, but they need it. Please call me if you can. Love, Karen." I read the email 3 times. Then I went to my computer and started searching. It didn't take long to find the news articles. The company my father had worked for had been caught in a massive fraud scandal. The CEO was facing federal charges. The company was gone, and thousands of employees had lost their jobs and their retirement savings. My father's name was in several articles, listed as one of the senior executives who had lost everything. I sat back, staring at the screen. After all these years. After building their comfortable, happy life on the grave of my son's memory. It was all gone. Karma, some might call it. Justice, others would say. I didn't have a name for what I felt. It wasn't satisfaction, not exactly. It was more like recognition. The universe had simply shifted. And suddenly, I wasn't the powerless one anymore. My phone rang a week later. My mother's number. I stared at it, watching it ring, then go to voicemail. She called again the next day. And the day after that, I never answered. Then, one evening in May, a knock on my apartment door. I looked through the peephole. It was my father. He looked older than I remembered. Grayer, thinner. Diminished. I opened the door, but left the chain engaged. "Yes? Sarah." His voice cracked. "Please. We need to talk." "About what? Can I come in?" "No." He flinched. I know things have been difficult. I know we've made mistakes. But we're family, Sarah. We need help." "Help," I repeated. The word tasted strange. "I lost my job. You probably heard. We're in serious financial trouble. The house is in foreclosure. Your mother's medical insurance is gone, and she has some health issues. We're asking our daughters for help. Olivia and Mark are doing what they can, but we thought maybe you could contribute something." "A loan," he added, his voice desperate. "Just a loan." I stared at him through the gap in the door. "You wouldn't ask if you weren't desperate, would you?" "No, Sarah. We're desperate." "That's interesting," I said softly. "I remember being desperate once." His face flushed. "Sarah, please. This isn't the time to dredge up the past. Isn't it?" I smiled. It wasn't a kind expression. "You're asking me for money because you're facing financial ruin. That sounds Familiar. This is different. How? I asked. We're your parents. And Liam was your grandson. His grandson's life. That was different, was it? The silence stretched, thick and cold between us. How much do you need? I finally asked. Hope, pathetic and sudden, flared in his eyes. We owe about $90,000 on the house, if we could come up with that, but anything would help. Even $20,000 or $30,000. $90,000. Just a little more than what I had begged him for. I felt something cold and final settle in my chest. The last piece of a puzzle clicking into place. I'll think about it, I said. And I closed the door in his face. Behind the closed door, I leaned my back against the wall and smiled. Finally. After 4 years of waiting, of planning, of scraping myself back together from nothing, the opportunity I had been waiting for had arrived. Now came the reckoning. I didn't contact my parents for 2 weeks. Let them wait. Let them wonder. Let them feel the crushing anxiety of uncertainty. Let them stare at the phone and pray it would ring, just like I had done so many times when I was waiting for news about a donor heart that never came. Every day that passed, their financial situation grew more dire. I knew this because I had started checking the public foreclosure listings online. Their house, the house I had grown up in, the house where Olivia's room was still a shrine, was scheduled for auction in 45 days. The clock was ticking. They were running out of time. During those 2 weeks, my mother called 17 times. My father called 9. Olivia sent 3 lengthy, rambling text messages explaining how our parents had always done their best, how they were good people who made some mistakes, and how family was supposed to forgive and help each other. The irony was apparently completely lost on her. I responded to none of them. Instead, I did research. I looked into their finances as thoroughly as I could from the outside. The house was worth about $320,000, and they owed $90,000. They had equity, but not enough to start over somewhere nice. If they lost it, they would have to move to a modest apartment, maybe in a less desirable area. They'd have to learn to live on Social Security and whatever my father could scrape together from a new job if anyone would hire a 63-year-old disgraced executive associated with a massive fraud. It would be hard for them. It would be humbling. It would be a complete reversal of the comfortable, arrogant life they had built. But they would survive. That was the difference between their situation and what Liam had faced. They weren't going to die. They were just going to be uncomfortable. On the 15th day, I finally called my father back. Sarah. He sounded breathless, desperate. Thank God. I was so worried you wouldn't call. I've been thinking about your request. I could hear the hope in his voice, pathetic and naked. And? I want to meet all of you. You, Mom, and Olivia. We need to have a conversation. Of course. Of course, he stammered. When? Where? We can come to you, or we could meet somewhere neutral. Whatever you prefer. My apartment, I said. Saturday at 2 p.m. Be there. We will. Thank you, Sarah. You don't know what this means to us. I hung up without responding. Saturday arrived, cold and gray. Appropriate weather for what I had planned. I had spent the morning preparing. I arranged chairs in my small living room, setting them in a semicircle facing my armchair. I set out a folder on the coffee table. I had printed documents, organized them chronologically. Everything was ready. They arrived at exactly 2 p.m., all 3 of them. My father looked worse than he had at my door. His suit hung loose on a frame that had lost significant weight. My mother seemed to have aged a decade in the last month, her hair more gray than I remembered, her face lined with deep worry. Olivia looked uncomfortable, dressed too formally for my shabby apartment, clutching her designer purse like a shield against the poverty of my neighborhood. Sarah, my mother said, moving as if to hug me. I stepped back, my face blank. Sit down. They arranged themselves on my second-hand couch, sitting close together like children called before a principal. Which, I supposed, they were. I remained standing. You asked me for $90,000, I started. We know it's a lot, my father said quickly. But we're prepared to offer collateral. To sign a formal loan agreement, we'd pay you back with interest. How? I asked flatly. You have no income. Mom doesn't work. What would you use to pay me back? I'm looking for work, he said. Something will come through. At 63? With your reputation attached to a fraud scandal? He flinched. That wasn't my fault. I had no idea what the CEO was doing. Ignorance isn't innocence, I said. You were a senior executive, you should have known. I picked up the folder from the coffee table. But we're not here to discuss your career failures. We're here to discuss your request for money. You say you're desperate. You say you have no other options. That I am your last hope. Will you help us? My mother asked, her voice small. That depends, I said. I have some questions first. I opened the folder and pulled out the first document. I placed it on the coffee table, sliding it toward them with a slow, deliberate movement. Do you remember this conversation? May 16th, 4 years ago. I came to you and I begged. I asked for $85,000 to pay for the treatment that would save his life. My mother's face went pale, her eyes darting away from the paper. Sarah, we've been over this. Have we? Because I don't think we have. Not really. Not honestly. I tapped the paper. It was a printout of my original crowdfunding page, the cost clearly listed. You told me you couldn't afford it. You told me you had to think about your retirement accounts. You told me I needed to be realistic because my financial situation was a mess. We made the best decision we could at the time, my father said stiffly, though his voice lacked its usual authority. We didn't know. Did you? I cut him off. I pulled out the next document. This is a receipt from Olivia's wedding planner. Total cost of services, $230,000. Paid in full by you. The date on the final check? 18 months after you told me you couldn't afford $85,000 to save your grandson's life. Olivia stood up, her face flushing red. This isn't fair. You're twisting everything to make us look like monsters. Sit down, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it was hard enough that she obeyed instantly, sinking back onto the cushion. I am not finished. I pulled out more documents, laying them on the table like playing cards. Wedding venue, $80. Flowers, $15. Catering, $40. Dress, $12. Photographer, $8,000. Entertainment, $10,000. Shall I continue? Shall I list the cost of the rehearsal dinner you wouldn't reschedule my son's funeral for? What do you want from us? My father demanded, his hands shaking. An apology? Fine. We're sorry. We made a mistake. Is that what you want to hear? A mistake? I repeated softly. You think choosing a party over your grandson's life was a mistake? We didn't know he was going to die, my mother whispered, tears leaking from her eyes. Yes, you did. The doctors told you. I told you. You knew time was running out, you knew he was struggling to breathe. You knew, and you didn't care enough to help. I pulled out another document. The one that hurt the most to look at. A photo of Liam in his hospital bed, taken 2 weeks before he died. He looked so small, buried under tubes and wires. This is what $85,000 would have saved, I said, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. This child. Your grandson. Remember him? Or have you successfully erased from the family narrative? My mother started crying openly now, hiding her face in her hands. Olivia looked away, staring at the floor. My father stared at the photo with an expression I couldn't quite read, shame, perhaps, or maybe just regret that he was caught. Sarah, please, my mother sobbed. We know we failed you. We know we should have done more. But we can't change the past. We can only ask for your mercy now. Please. We are desperate. Mercy? I placed the photo back in the folder carefully, treating it with the reverence they never showed the boy in it. That's interesting. I don't remember receiving much mercy when I begged you for help. When I sold everything I owned. When I was drowning in medical bills. When I ate ramen for dinner every night so I could afford his medication. When you refused me. We didn't understand how bad it was, my father said. Didn't you? I showed you the bills. I explained that his heart was failing. What part of he will die was unclear. Silence filled the room. But you understood perfectly well how important Olivia's wedding was, I continued. You understood that the centerpieces needed to be exactly right. That your golden child deserved the best money could buy. You understood the concept of no budget limits for her. I sat down across from them, leaning forward, my elbows on my knees. Here is what I have learned in the past 4 years. You didn't help Liam because you didn't want to. It wasn't about the money. You had the money. You proved that. It was about choice. You chose what mattered to you. That's not true. Olivia protested weakly. They were trying to protect their retirement accounts, were they? Because they spent almost 3 times that amount on your wedding. Math doesn't lie, Olivia. Priorities don't lie. My father leaned forward. Sarah, I understand you're angry. You have every right to be. But are you really going to punish us now, when we need you most? Are you going to be as cruel as you think we were? Cruel, I said, tasting the word. Is it cruel to make choices based on what matters to you? Is it cruel to decide that your resources should go toward your own priorities rather than someone else's crisis? Because that is what you taught me. That is the lesson you gave me when my son was dying. So, you won't help us? My mother said flatly, wiping her eyes. I didn't say that. I picked up the folder and pulled out the last item. A check. I am willing to give you $90,000. Hope bloomed on their faces, desperate and immediate. It was ugly to watch. However, I continued, letting the word hang in the air, heavy and cold. There are conditions. Anything, my father said, leaning forward so fast he almost fell off the couch. We'll sign whatever you want. Payment plans, interest, collateral on the house, anything. It's not about payment, I said. I set the check down on the coffee table, placing it directly on top of the photo of Liam. It was made out for $90,000, dated for today. All 3 of them stared at it, mesmerized, like it was the only thing in the room. The first condition, I said, my voice quiet and clear, is that you acknowledge, here and now, exactly what you did. I want to hear you say it out loud. I want you to say that you chose Olivia's wedding over Liam's life. That you had the money, and you refused to help. They stared at me, the hope on their faces curdling into shock. Olivia looked at her parents, her face pale. You don't have to do this. She's trying to humiliate you. Yes, I agreed, my voice dangerously calm. I am. Just like you humiliated me when I stood in your doorway, begging with medical bills in my hand, and you told me to be realistic. Just like you humiliated me, I said, my eyes locking onto Olivia, when you asked me to celebrate your party while my son was on palliative care. Just like you all humiliated me when you asked me to move my son's funeral. Because of a rehearsal dinner. So, yes. I want you to say it. Out loud. That you made a choice, and Liam died because of it. My mother was crying harder now, those racking, silent sobs that shook her entire body. My father's face was a mottled, angry red. But they needed that check. They needed to stop the foreclosure. They were running out of time. My father was the first to break. His eyes were fixed on the check. We chose the wedding, he finally said, his voice a hoarse whisper, barely audible. We had the money. And we chose to spend it on Olivia's wedding instead of Liam's treatment. And? I prompted, my voice like steel. And? He died, my father choked out. He died because we didn't help. Mom. I turned my gaze to my mother. We should have helped you, she whispered. Her voice broken and wet. We should have. We should have saved him. We were wrong, Sarah. We were so wrong. I turned to Olivia. And you? What's your role in this, as the golden child? I didn't know, she said quickly, her eyes wide with false innocence. I didn't know they'd refused to help Liam. Didn't you? I asked. You never wondered where the money for your unlimited wedding budget came from. You never thought it was odd that your sister, who was drowning in medical debt, suddenly stopped asking for help? You never questioned having your wedding 3 days after your nephew was buried, my son? You never thought about any of it, did you? She had no answer. She just stared at the floor, her face burning with shame. Here is the second condition, I continued, standing up. You take this money. You save your house. And you never, ever contact me again. Sarah, you can't mean that, my mother gasped, looking up. We're family. No, I corrected her, my voice final. We share DNA. Family is something else. Family shows up, family sacrifices. Family doesn't let children die while they plan parties. As of this moment, you are strangers to me. I walked to my front door and opened it wide, letting the cold afternoon air fill the room. Those are my conditions. Take the check, or leave it. You have 60 seconds to decide. They looked at each other. A frantic, silent conversation of glances and panic. I watched them calculate. I watched them weigh their pride against their desperation. It took them 43 seconds. My father stood, his movements stiff and old, and picked up the check from the table. We accept your conditions," he said, his voice hollow. Good. I pointed to the coffee table. There's a document on the table next to the photo. It's a formal, legally binding no-contact agreement. It states you will have no further contact with me, ever, by any means. Sign it. They signed it without even reading it. That told me everything. My father's signature was shaky. My mother could barely hold the pen, her tears smudging the ink. Olivia signed with an angry, sharp stroke, her face a mask of suppressed rage. When they finished, I collected the document and stepped back from the door. "You can go now. Sarah." My father started, his eyes pleading. "You agreed to the conditions," I cut him off. "No contact. That starts now. Leave." They filed out silently. My mother, crying. My father, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Olivia, walking stiffly beside them. I closed the door behind them. I locked it. And I slid the deadbolt home. Then, I walked to my bedroom and opened my laptop. I pulled up my bank account. The $90,000 I had just given them was gone. Years of careful saving, of living modestly, of putting aside every extra penny, gone in an instant. But I wasn't done. I opened my email and composed a new message. The recipient. My Aunt Karen. I attached a document. A letter I had written months ago, waiting for this exact moment. Aunt Karen, I wanted you to know what really happened with Liam. I've attached a complete, documented timeline of events, including every single request I made for help and the responses I received. I've also included documentation of the expenses my parents incurred during that same period, specifically regarding Olivia's wedding. I thought the rest of the family should finally know the truth. Love, Sarah. I hit send. The document I'd attached was comprehensive. Every conversation. Every refusal. Every wedding expense. Every hospital bill. The photo of Liam in his hospital bed. Screenshots of my mother's Facebook post calling Chloe her first grandchild. The timeline showing my parents attended a rehearsal dinner instead of my son's funeral reception. Everything. Laid out in chronological, undeniable detail. My Aunt Karen was the central hub of the family gossip network. By tomorrow, everyone would know. A knock came at my door an hour later. I looked through the peephole. Olivia, standing there alone, her face a mask of fury. I opened the door, but didn't invite her in. "You signed an agreement not to contact me." "That email," she hissed. "You can't do that. You're ruining their lives." "I'm telling the truth," I said calmly. "There's a difference. You're vindictive and cruel. You're destroying them out of spite." "No," I said, my voice even. "I'm giving them exactly what they gave me. Consequences. Actions have consequences, Olivia. They made their choices, and now they get to live with them. Just like I've had to live, every single day, with the consequences of their choices." "They gave you $90,000, she shrieked. "They gave me back a fraction of what they stole from Liam, and from me. And they only did it because they were desperate. We both know that. You're never going to let this go, are you? You're going to hate us forever." "I don't hate you," I said, and I was surprised to find that it was the absolute truth. "Hate requires caring. I don't care about any of you anymore. You stopped being my family the day you chose a party over my son's life. Now, you're just strangers. Mom is devastated. Dad looks broken. Was it worth it? Was this worth it to you? Ask Liam if it was worth it," I said. "Oh, wait, you can't. Because he's dead." Her face crumpled. "You really are as heartless as they always said you were." "Heartless," I repeated. "My heart broke 4 years ago, Olivia, and you weren't there to see it. You were too busy picking out flowers. So, don't you ever talk to me about being heartless." She turned and walked away. I closed the door for the last time on my biological family. Over the next few months, I heard through indirect channels, mostly from Aunt Karen, what happened. My parents were, indeed, socially ostracized. Friends stopped calling. Their country club membership was quietly not renewed. They kept their house, but it became a prison, a place where they had to live, every day, with the truth. My father eventually found some low-level consulting work, making a fraction of his former salary. My mother, I heard, developed anxiety issues. Olivia and Mark moved to another state, putting distance between themselves and the scandal. I heard my mother started telling people I was dead. That it was simply easier than explaining why her daughter wanted nothing to do with her. And in a way, I was. The daughter who had been grateful for scraps, who had accepted being second best, who had swallowed her pain to keep the peace, that person didn't exist anymore. As for me, I continued to build my life. I made real friends, the kind who show up. I traveled to places Liam would have loved. I lived for both of us. The $90,000 was worth it. Not because they deserved the help, but because it gave me closure. I had proven that I was the better person. The one who did show mercy, even when none had been shown to me. And then I walked away, leaving them to live with the weight of their own choices. Some might say I was cruel. But those people never watched their child die alone while their family celebrated. They never had to choose between electricity and medicine. I gave my parents exactly what they'd taught me. That family is conditional. That love has limits. And that some lives, apparently, matter more than others. I simply returned their lessons, wrapped in a check they couldn't refuse and a truth they could no longer escape. And I moved forward into a future they would never be a part of, carrying Liam's memory with me, finally at peace.